My name is Angelina. In America, one public moment can change everything. A laugh on a giant screen, and suddenly your life is a headline. Mine began with a kiss on the big screen, and ended with me clearing my name and exposing everyone who thought they could get away with it. My name is Angelina. In America, a single embarrassing moment can travel farther than a confession. It goes viral in minutes, not hours. I thought my life was ordinary. A steady marriage, a respected job at a growing tech company, and friends who felt like family. Then a kiss on a giant screen at a Coldplay concert turned my ordinary life into a public spectacle. Daniel and I had been married 7 years. He worked long hours, but we had routines, dinners, laughter. Claire Hart was my friend from college who later joined the same company and quickly rose through the ranks. She was warm at parties and brilliant in meetings, the kind of person you trusted with a secret. When I saw Claire and a senior executive named Owen Blake on stage in that viral clip, I didn't register much at first, just surprise. Then the captions rolled. Caught on kiss cam, hot mic moment. I hadn't known Daniel at that concert. He'd told me he had client dinner. The clip included behind-the-scenes shots, the camera panning to people in the crowd and landing on Claire and Owen, both laughing and leaning in. For a second, it looked playful and harmless, but within minutes, someone tagged me, and then another woman I knew. The footage showed Claire sitting a few rows from the couple, whispering to Owen. It showed a slow, unmistakable glance between Owen and Daniel at the bar. My phone filled with messages. Is that Daniel? Why is he with them? Wasn't he supposed to be with you? I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My home phone rang once, and I let it go to voicemail. I needed air. I walked to the kitchen, palms damp, and listened to the tiny, hateful voice of notification after notification. When the first wave of disbelief hit, I wanted to collapse. But a different voice cut through the fog. Practical, cold. Find out what's real. Don't trust clips that could be doctored. Don't trust the commentariat. But don't ignore patterns either. The night's chaos tightened into an outline in my head. Someone had pieced together moments and dropped them like breadcrumbs. Whoever had done it wanted something. Attention, a scandal, leverage, or simply to hurt. I decided that I wasn't going to be the punchline on someone else's screen. If this was betrayal, I would treat it as evidence. If it was a setup, I would find the strings. Either way, the rest of their lives was about to change. I closed the laptop, picked up a pen, and began to write names, dates, and places. My map to truth and reckoning. The morning after the clip went viral, I didn't sleep. My kitchen looked the same, white mugs, a stack of mail, but everything felt altered, like a photograph that had been smeared. I moved through routines while my mind dissected the night. If the kiss was a fluke, fine. If there was more, if Daniel had woven an affair and corporate favors into a single web, I needed to find the threads. I started where everyone starts now, my phone. Messages mapped panic. A coworker sent a shaky clip from the arena where a man, clearly Daniel, stood by the bar with a woman who looked like Claire. He raised a glass. They left. The video was short, but comments stitched context, and people began to marvel over the same blink that had stopped my breath. At work the next day, I kept my face composed while I watched reactions. People whispered in corners and pretended not to glance. Claire passed me in the hall with her soft smile. Up close, it felt manufactured. In a meeting, a manager coughed a joke. "Scandals sell," he said, then smiled as if it were clever. The office had become a lobby of mirrors reflecting rumors back at me. I wanted facts, not gossip. I logged into shared calendars and expense accounts I could access as a project lead. There were odd entries. Client hospitality that led to weekend hotel stays. reimbursements routed through a shell company bearing Claire's initials, travel coded as consulting fees. Little flags became a trail. I called Daniel under the pretense of needing a file. He answered briskly, voice practiced. "Did you see that stupid video?" he asked, as if it were trivial. There was an edge, defensive, guarded. He claimed client dinners and promised receipts. Promises are cheap. Paper is harder to fake. So I gathered what I could. Screenshots, timestamps from a colleague's check-in, a corporate card charge tied to a room number, every breadcrumb that could be verified. I contacted an old friend who handled audits privately and asked for a discreet opinion. He agreed to look. I sat at my desk that evening and began to draft a private inventory. Names, dates, transactions, witness hints. Each entry became a small accusation written into a ledger I kept hidden. The more I wrote, the less I felt like a shocked wife, and the more I felt like an investigator closing in on a case she would not lose. Once the pattern was clear, impatience warred with patience. Revenge that stings needs timing. Exposed too soon, and they bury the truth. So I planned. I consolidated files, printed receipts, and encrypted a folder on a thumb drive I kept hidden in a book. I made copies and scattered them with people I could trust. An old friend at a law firm, the audit contact, and a distant cousin who handled PR. If anything happened to my notes, the trail would still exist. I also needed to manipulate appearances. People underestimate the power of perceived weakness. At work, I played the part of the wounded friend. Soft eyes, quieter voice, a few sighs in hallways to let Claire think I was slipping. When Daniel suggested I move back from certain projects, I pretended to accept, even feigned uncertainty about my role. Claire, drunk on assumed advantage, became careless. She began to send messages that were too casual, extend invitations that left a trail, and answer calls in public with careless language. Next, I staged small traps. I arranged, through a mutual acquaintance, a dinner where Claire would boast about an upcoming client weekend she'd arranged. The dinner was off the record. I recorded the call on my phone. I made sure corporate cards were used for certain expenses, that receipts would come through channels the auditor would notice. I slipped a subtle question into a company survey about hospitality spending patterns, enough to have systems flag anomalies later. Crucially, I recruited allies. My old friend at the law firm agreed to review anything that looked like embezzlement. The auditor I'd contacted earlier said he could do a cursory check for irregularities under the guise of a voluntary review. PR would stand by to manage leaks in a way that protected me. Each ally understood the stakes. If the company's reputation faltered because of fraud, innocent people could suffer. My goal was justice, not spectacle. I rehearsed my narrative. Public exposure has to be surgical. I practiced speaking calmly, letting evidence speak, never dramatizing beyond the truth. If I accused, I had to prove it. If I pointed fingers, they had to be attached to receipts. As the shareholders' meeting date drew closer, I felt a strange steadiness. The plan was not simply to punish. Punishment is petty. It was to restore what was stolen and to remove the cancer from the corporate body. I had moved from hurt wife into a strategist with a ledger. I printed a final binder, evidence organized, timestamps verified, and a cover letter addressed to the board. The moment must be precise. The shareholders' meeting felt sterile, like a courtroom with coffee. Claire arrived composed, necklace gleaming as if reputation could be polished. I sat near the back, binder under my arm, breathing slow. The CEO spoke about growth. Owen made a joke about culture. When the chatter settled, I stood. "Before we open for questions," I said, voice steady, I have an item that requires the board's immediate attention. I laid out a timeline. Transactions matched to nights out. Hotel room numbers cross-referenced with corporate cards, and voice memos where Claire bragged about arranging discreet hospitality. I read a text where Owen suggested we can take care of this ourselves. You could feel the collective shift: surprise, denial, then blunt concern for liability. The chair called for counsel. Legal faces went tight. Questions aimed at me were clinical. How did I obtain this? I answered calmly, tying each claim to paper. The auditor I'd lined up flagged entries, reimbursements that funneled payments through shell accounts. Owen's mask slipped first. He called errors clerical and accused me of malice. Claire teared up, which softened some, but the board's priority was exposure risk. Within hours, accounts were frozen and an independent investigation launched. Outside the room, the air tasted different. The PR team mobilized like firefighters, drafting statements to address concerns without naming specifics. Investors demanded transparency calls. I joined one conference with counsel at my side and presented facts, not fury. Facts moved markets more than theatrics. In hours, the company's stock wobbled. Social media, cruel and fast, hot-wired the scandal. Threads speculated about affairs and corporate misconduct. Claire's curated life dropped into chaos. DMs flooded, her photos archived by strangers. Owen's assistant resigned, and his contacts began to distance themselves. The life built on access and favors began to crack. When Owen came home that night, he met my eyes and spat, "You ruined me." Anger echoed in him, and something else. Fear. He threatened legal action in the same breath that he asked me to retract the evidence. I told him to call his lawyer. He did. That night, my phone buzzed with strangers offering support, alongside venomous messages calling me vengeful. A former colleague texted that she'd long suspected favors had been misused and offered to testify. Mix of allies and enemies felt like an aftershock. The first blow was delivered, but consequences would roll forward for months. Morning after the boardroom, the world looked sharper, as if a lens had cleared. Owen's suspension was official. Claire had been placed on leave pending investigation. Press statements circulated with bland language that tried to keep dignity intact while acknowledging a probe. For most people, that would be victory. For me, it was a beginning. Legal filings followed. Subpoenas arrived like blunt instruments. The auditor's report found clear irregularities, payments routed to vendors that did not exist, and hospitality expenses that matched private getaways. The firm's internal counsel moved quickly, and criminal referrals were discussed. Owen and Claire scrambled to explain, and slowly their circle thinned as vendors and partners distanced themselves. I kept to work, insisting on routine. There were interviews to give, careful, scripted, and meetings with counsel. The PR people urged measured statements. "We take these matters seriously," said one line. "We are cooperating with investigators," said another. I let them handle the noise. My job was document, deliver, repeat. At home, Daniel stopped trying to smooth things over. He avoided eye contact and then chose distance, claiming he needed time to think. His absence was a hollow I had no desire to fill. I slept differently. Less dream, more calculation. I drafted separation papers with an attorney in precise, non-emotional language. It felt like closing a chapter with a stapler, efficient and devoid of melodrama. Clara attempted outreach. Calls at odd hours, messages full of apology and gaslighting. "I never meant it for it to go this far," she wrote. "I thought we were doing what was right for the company." She pleaded that we drop the public narrative. My reply was brief. Evidence is impartial. It speaks. If she wanted mercy, it would be earned through truth, not supplication. Financial recovery was messy. Some funds were recovered through freezes and restitution negotiations. Other sums evaporated into offshore accounts that would take long litigation to trace. Still, shareholders requested audits that resulted in policy changes, Tighter controls, stricter approvals, and mandatory transparency measures. The company would survive. It would just be shorn of comfortable secrecy. Months later, the headlines cooled. Owen faced civil suits. Claire left with a tarnished resume. Daniel moved out to an apartment 2 blocks away and tried, clumsily, to be casual when we passed on sidewalks. I replaced anger with pragmatic plans. New budgets, new leadership, and slow rebuilding of relationships with colleagues who stayed. In quiet moments, I planted seeds, new projects, new friendships, and watched life grow back again. Revenge, I learned, is not spectacle. It's the patient reconstruction after betrayal, a ledger kept clean and fair. You don't have to make noise to win. You have to show receipts. That truth rebuilt me more than any dramatic revenge could.